SMU political science professor Matthew Wilson, thank you so much and welcome back to On Politics.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So here we are, the Democratic primary for U.S. Senate getting more interesting now that State Representative James Talarico has entered the race. And I'm wondering, how do you think this changes the dynamics? Because former Congressman Colin Allred has already been in, retired astronaut Terry Virts has been in. So what do you make of this new entrant?
Well, I think it means that there will be a race. At a minimum, you have Colin Allred, who has statewide name recognition and a previous run, and now Talarico, who has generated a lot of attention among elements of the Democratic base and who has gotten some attention because of his appearance with Joe Rogan. That creates a competitive primary environment. Now, the big thing that we're waiting on the Democratic side is to see if Beto O'Rourke is going to run. He polls pretty well among Democratic primary voters, but he hasn't declared an intention to run for the Senate seat yet. So that's the big wild card. But right now, even if it's just Allred and Talarico as major candidates, we're going to have a competitive race on the Democratic side.
What does this say about the Democratic Party?
Well, I think it shows that the Democratic Party is trying to figure out which way it wants to go. It has lost many times in a row in Texas statewide races. They lost with two very different kinds of candidates. They lost in 2018 with Beto O'Rourke. They lost in 2024 with Colin Allred. It's no different in terms of their outcome, regardless of whether they have a high energy candidate, regardless of whether they have a more reserved candidate, whether they have someone perceived as being on the left, whether they have someone perceived as being more centrist. They've lost. So they're looking for perhaps a new path. That's at least what Talarico is counting on, saying, I'm a fresh face, I bring a different approach, and we'll see if Democratic primary voters are looking for that.
Now, there's a common theme when you look at what Talarico is saying and also Colin Allred, because both are talking about unrigging the system. The system is rigged. And for Talarico, he's talking about, fighting back against the billionaires. What do you make of this common thread between Talarico and Allred about unrigging the system?
Well, it's a common thread between Talarico and Allred and Donald Trump, for that matter. This is language that we've seen deployed by people in both political parties for several years now. There's this widespread populist discontent in the American electorate. And in fact, it goes beyond the United States. We see it in Europe and other places as well, that people on both the left and the right are trying to tap into. And there's a skepticism of elites. There's a perception that ordinary people have the deck stacked against them. And Republicans and Democrats can both capitalize on that in their own ways. But everybody running knows that that's the kind of language they're going to have to speak to really energize voters.
And, as far as that whole issue is concerned, I mean, what are you going to be looking for specifically in the Democratic primary and how they separate themselves? Because they have to separate themselves somehow, right? You can't both run on the same exact thing.
Well, I think what we'll see in the Democratic primary is probably a lot like what we'll see in the Republican primary, in that there won't be many differences on the issues between the candidates. It'll be a contest about style, about how to take the battle to the other side. Because everybody running on the Democratic side is going to believe in basically the same things. They're all going to say Donald Trump is a terrible president. They're all going to say they want to go to Washington to stymie his agenda and his destruction of American democracy, et cetera, et cetera. They're all going to be pro-choice. They're all going to oppose the big, beautiful bill. So there won't be issue differences. The question is, who is perceived to have the more effective style and the more effective persona to get some things done on the Democratic side? Same thing on the Republican side. There are no meaningful differences on the core issues between John Cornyn and Ken Paxton. It's about style and the way of doing politics. And so I think that's going to be the substance of the battle on both sides.
Is it going to matter who wins the endorsement of Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer?
I don't think it matters very much. I think Schumer's not very popular among Democrats. He has a pretty low approval rating. He's perceived by Democratic base voters as being pretty ineffectual. And I don't think that Texas politics is often swayed by the way that a senator from New York weighs in.
But doesn't he have money to go along with the endorsement?
Well, that's the one thing that he could potentially bring to the table. He could direct some national level campaign funds to one candidate or the other. But increasingly candidates in this day and age, they freelance and they raise their own money and they can develop their own big donor networks. So yes, obviously it's helpful to have national party support, but if you can catch fire with a group of wealthy donors, whether or not you're endorsed by the Senate minority leader, you can make a go of a campaign.
Now, all this to say that the Democrats who are running, and there's so many of them, all this to say that because of this, I mean, they wouldn't be running, right, if it was just Cornyn and not Paxton challenging Cornyn, right? They all think that Paxton is weak, right? I mean,
some would be running no matter what, but certainly just about everybody on the Democratic side would rather run against Ken Paxton than John Cornyn. They perceive that Paxton is damaged goods and is potentially vulnerable, that he brings both personal and political ethical baggage to the table that opens up some potential lines of attack. So I think that, combined with a midterm election year for a Republican president, which normally is not great for Republicans, gives Democrats a sense that they have a chance here. So definitely that whole set of Democratic candidates seeking this office, they're rooting for Ken Paxton on the Republican side. That's pretty clear. And that does give them more of a sense that this seat might be in play.
We've heard Senator Cornyn bring this up, where, he is running, and if Paxton is challenging him, that is going to make, perhaps this a more open seat for Democrats to try to get in. And Senate Republicans are going to have to spend a fortune defending a seat that should be Republican in his eyes. And so how concerned do you think Republicans are, and perhaps the White House is, about Paxton winning a primary and then not being able to win a general?
I think they're very concerned. It's not that they think that Paxton is a sure loser, but they think that Paxton is a weaker candidate and opens more of a potential to lose the seat than Cornyn would. So I think Republicans feel pretty good about their chances if Cornyn is their nominee. If Paxton is their nominee, they see it as more of a jump ball, more of a toss-up type situation. That's why you see a lot of the Republican senatorial money and energy out of Washington coming in behind John Cornyn. Donald Trump has not weighed in yet on this race. If he were to do so, that would be hugely influential. We know that Trump carries a lot of weight with the Republican primary electorate. So what he decides to do is going to be pivotal in deciding how this Republican primary breaks.
Last question, and that is on Wesley Hunt, who is circling. He's hovering. He's trying to figure out if he's going to get into the Republican primary, congressman out of Houston. What do you think the chances are of that happening?
I think there's a reasonable chance that he tries to make a go of it. I think it would be an uphill battle for him because it's not clear who his core set of voters would be. That is, the more establishment folks and those who are thinking strategically about holding the seat, they're going to tend to line up with Cornyn. The more insurgent MAGA wing of the party is quite loyal to Ken Paxton. So what's the set of voters that Hunt could carve off to plausibly win the race? Now, his argument is that he brings more conservative energy than Cornyn does without the ethical baggage that Paxton has. And in theory, that could be an appealing argument, just not sure that that's going to break through with enough primary voters to get him over the hump.
SMU Professor Matthew Wilson, thank you so much.
Oh, no problem.
Appreciate the insight.